Vielen Dank für die Einladung und ich freue mich sehr, dass ich hier sein kann. Und vielen Dank, mein herzlichen Dank gilt besonders Holger und das organisatorische Team vom Tanzkongress, Elisabeth, Mark, vielen Dank. Und auch das Forschungsprojekt Interweaving Performance Culture der FU Berlin. Mein Vortragstitel heißt The Aging Body in Dance, Cultural Politics of Age in Euro-American and Japanese dance. Okay. As a result of recent medical dance advancements, the percentage of elderly people in society has drastically increased, and aging has become a global phenomenon. In addition to the population growing older, aging is also becoming an emerging theme in various aspects of society in the 21st century. From a demographic perspective, an aging population is a result of increased life expectancy and declining fertility rates. Therefore, the aging of the population is also the result of a decreasing percentage of children within society. Aging refers to getting older. If we think of aging as a gradual temporal process, then two subjects need to be reconsidered: re-examination of chronological age and the fundamental value of these socially constructed minorities. In addition, in the field of dance, the issue of aging illuminates the system and the politics of this art form, which requires the human body to be used as its own medium. Who is capable of dancing professionally and how long? I give the handout, the one-page handout, so you can see the kind of structure of my talk. And I go to one, the aging body in dance, question mark. Aging is a forbidden subject in many Euro-American contexts. This is not only a biological factor, but also a cultural factor. Simone de Beauvoir stated that society looks upon old age as a kind of shameful secret. It is a depressing and discussable taboo. The aesthetics of dance also reflects this cultural prejudice of aging. In Euro-American concert dance history, New York postmodern dance in the 1960s was the first to question the category of dance movement. Everyone, including amateurs, participated in dance, regardless of their level of dance training. However, the aesthetics of aging has not yet been integrated into the contemporary dance scene. In 2002, a postmodern dancer, Yvonne Rainer, who reconsidered dance technique by presenting everyday walking as a dance piece, gave a lecture called Skirting and Aging, an aging artist's memoir, in which she explained her own theory. I quote her text. You can see her text on your handout. Quote, "To talk about the career of a dancer or choreographer is necessarily, either directly or indirectly, to talk about aging. Graphic artists, musicians, photographers, composers, and writers don't age. They mature. But there is no getting around it that the dancer's physical instrument, her body, grows weaker, stiffer, less supple. It, in a word, ages. And that very fact of physical deterioration, universal to all living things on this earth, will affect young dancers' future in far more profound way than that of any other kind of artist." End quote. She began her talk with a discussion about aging. Contrasting artists in other fields, Rainer described aging for dancers as a negative element, which she described as physical deterioration. According to Rainer, dancers do not mature. They just become unable to move. In terms of aging, performance studies scholar Janice Ross explains the situation of dance in a Euro-American context. Because youth, physical power, and stamina are the attributes on which the art from it constituted, in most Western theatrical dance forms, a performer is considered old at 35 and generally finished outside of character or mime roles after the early 40s. To continue dancing even into one's 50s is a rarity. Into one's 60s is practically unheard of, she said. Dance in the West is different from other art forms because dancer needs youth more than maturity. All dancers retire from dance. Talking about aging in dance is therefore a provoking act in the Euro-American dance culture. In 2006, Yvonne Rainer came back to dance and started working with age difference in her dance piece. Although some European contemporary choreographers, such as Meg Stewart and Xavier Leroy, aim to create the deformed or transformed dancing bodies on stage, the alternative image of bodies are shown mostly by their trained young dancers. Owen Smith, a scholar of disability studies, criticized this aspect of contemporary dance, which are challenging this formula but holding normalized body in the classical ballet structure. He writes, despite being developed to counter the rigid formalisms of classical ballet, contemporary dance has still tended to adapt classical codes and structures governing the representations of aesthetic vocabularies, and of the training through which these are simulated by individual dancers. So, there's the normalized body in the classical ballet code still reject the aesthetics of aging in dance in Europe. Or not. In contrast to the aged bodies, some contemporary dance performances in Europe shed light on the image of children. In 2011, French choreographer Boris Chalmats presented a new piece entitled Enfant, in which 26 children with ages between 6 and 12 performed with 9 professional adult dancers. At the beginning of the piece, a few mechanical cranes and a huge belt conveyor in the center of the stage continue carrying the bodies of unconscious small children attired in black. Their bodies were treated as if they are manufactured products. During the piece, the adult dancers caught the children's delicate sleeping bodies, raised them up in the air and made them fly, hugged them and glided them. The children were played with and controlled by the adults. While this scene was on, the music was Michael Jackson played in the background, where the quaking crane hangs children in the air. These images are easily associated with violence and child abuse. This possibly disturbing sight, however, switched to the kingdom of children at the end, when the man playing bagpipes suddenly appeared on stage. As he continued playing his instrument, the children started stretching their bodies and became conscious. Then the adults started falling asleep on stage. The children now started to play with the bodies of those sleeping adults. The man, like the piper of Hamelin, toyed with the power of control, and the kingdom of children appeared on stage at the end of the piece. I show just a short clip of this piece. Some audience members expressed their anger and confusion because the children seemed to project the image of child abuse, even though the children were treated with care. For this piece, Chalmers quotes The Inhuman Reflections on Time by Jean-François Lyotard, writing, "The child is eminently human beings because his distress announces and promises every possibility. Chalmers questions the dependency and intersubjectivity of children in this choreography, which evokes the audience memories of social problems in our societies. Children are to be dependent and manipulated. However, they are actually the ones who control adults. 2. Discovery of aging in Europe and Japan. The idea of early childhood is the product of modern society. In other words, the place of children in the society has been historically and culturally constructed from time to time, as opposed to being an easy projection of our own images as children. Philosopher and historian Philippe Ariès points out that there was no places for childhood in the medieval world, and the general idea of adorable children as individuals is an illusion of a modern society. By showing how children were perceived differently in the past, he leads us to question ourselves how the present image, the affection for, and the definition of children are particular to the modern European society. In contrast to the Euro-American settings of childhood, Japan experienced a complicated process of aging through the modernization of society. In terms of chronological age, Japan and other East Asian countries followed the lunar calendar in the past and counted the person's age by the year count, which is kazoedoshi in Japanese. In this Japanese system, people counted the moment when a child is born as 1 year. So a newborn child is 1 year old. Then, with the arrival of each new year, people add 1 year to their ages on New Year's Day. In 1873, the Japanese government converted from the tempo lunisolar calendar to the solar calendar, and in 1902, it established a law to switch from the year count to the birthday count. As a result, a person can be of 4 different ages in Japan. Japan's modern education system was divided into categories according to the years of childhood. Since the modern educational system began in the year 1872, according to sociologist Kazue Kawahara, the term children, which is jido in Japanese, from 6 to 12 years old, has been used. Although the term jido literally means students at elementary school, in terms of jido as an age category determined by years, Kawahara further insists that children in Japan were fit into the compulsory educational system in order to make them proper members of the modern nation state. Before the modern school system, the experience of aging in Japan seems to be transmigrating, and this idea is still alive in some religious texts and performances. Religious scholar Toji Kamata describes the experience of circling time in Japan and its consequences for the concept of old and infants in his discussion of a Shintoistic worldview. He proposed a research field called Odoron, which is a theory of old folks and children. In medieval society, these marginalized beings were ignored from the social functions and escaped punishment even if they had committed a crime. On the other hand, they embodied the spiritual meaning of society and engaged in ritual ceremony. Kamata states, people used to see the circle of life, which is to recognize the useful energy in the aged. In contrast, today, many people only recognize the disappearance and weakness of youth in the aged. People lost a sense of circle of life, the ecosystem of human beings. In medieval Japan, death is not an end, but simply a movement of a cycle. Therefore, the very old and very young are closest to the unseen worlds, and hence to a state of spirituality and detachment from this reality. These cultural conceptions of a circle of life and time circulation profoundly influence the Japanese experience of aging. In the traditional Japanese performing arts, which were influenced by the Shintoist and Buddhist rituals, one still finds several repertoires only for the aged and children. The ritualistic piece of No called Sagi, namely the sacred heron bird, is only allowed to be performed by a performer who is older than 61 or by a child who has not yet passed through the ritual of becoming an adult. I showed these photos. So this is a child in the Sagi no piece. So this is a little small, but it's an older no performer. And there's also a dance piece called Kamuro in Kabuki and Odori repertoires, which is appropriate to either the aged or the infant. So this is Kamuro for especially the girls' role. Aging dancers in their 60s and 70s in the field of traditional Japanese theater and dance are common. Gerontocratic family structure in Japanese culture supports these cultural values as traditionally Japanese. The issue of aging as getting older is very much related to the essence of traditional art in Japan. In Japanese, people say that longevity is a part of art, which is gay in Japanese. That matters not only because they live longer and that's not because people live longer, but because people live longer and also work. Aging matters to the process of artistic training, and the continuous daily training as an artistic practice exists in Japanese aesthetics. One does not attain the ultimate level of artwork until one practices every day and lives longer. Aging is thus the ultimate purpose in traditional Japanese arts. 3. Infantilism and the aging body in contemporary Japan. The image of aging is considered as the ultimate purpose in traditional art. So how about contemporary Japanese culture? Takashi Murakami, an internationally renowned contemporary Japanese visual artist inspired by anime or otaku culture, explains this infantilism in Japanese pop culture was Japan's response to World War II and the atomic bomb. In his opinion, Japan's infantilism is the result of the trauma of experiencing the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the nation's post-war dependency on the long-term influence of the United States. He represents this sentiment in his own artworks in the exhibition entitled Little Boy. Japan's unequal paternalistic political dependency on the US makes this country more infantile. Since 2000, certain dancing bodies in contemporary dance in Japan have been described as child body, in Japanese, kodomo shintai. In this category of child body, there is a loss of technically trained bodies. The image of infancy is brought out through performers' rejection or misuse of proper dance technique under the shadow of Japan's modernity. Dance critic Keisuke Sakurai described how most of Japanese contemporary dance groups are a copy of previous dance troupes and are neither conscious nor critical about the existing dance techniques and vocabularies. However, he finds a breakout in a dance collective called Nibrol, who throw away dance technique and instead explore high-speed ordinary movements such as child's body. Other international critics followed Sakurai by describing Nibrol's high-speed overloaded choreography based on screams and blasting physical movement as the embodiment of a child body. So I show one piece in 2000 by Nibrol called Chusha Kinshi. And later, Sakurai, this dance critic, produced and curated numbers of the performance series, Azumabashi Dance Crossing, under the title of Child Bodies. Various dance and performance artists, including the former member of Nibrol, Natsuko Tezuka, and Toshiki Okada's Cherfish, joined this performance series. Within the category of this child body, artists struggle for further movement possibility beyond the consciousness and previous dance technique. Choreographer/dancer Natsuko Tezuka and director/playwright Toshiki Okada used to work together and share their ideas of making unconscious bodily movement conscious by exploring the reason why one moves and is moved. Natsuko Tezuka continued to ask herself about movement because she was not capable of properly moving. Not reshaping her body in order to overcome her weak point, but re-examining her own body and setting up a new framework for her body opened up the new approach toward movement. Toshiki Okada was also inspired by Tezuka and adapted many of her ideas into his theater piece and performance method. And Toshiki Okada's Cherfish is already known in Germany, so I show only a short piece of Natsuko Tezuka. It's called Shiteki Kaibou Jikken 2. In Europe and the US, as long as someone works in dance, one is expected to engage critically in this historical classic dance context with maturity and refinement. In contrast, dance artists in Japan were and still are outsiders of this dance history, dominated by Euro-American cultural traditions. However, the dominant image of an ideal dancing body is still that of a Euro-American modern subject with a proper, healthy, and trained body. Therefore, the child body appeared in Japan, where because there was no historical context of ballet, dancers are conscious of neither the Euro-American historical context of dance, nor their dancing. Sakurai's argument in terms of child body in dance is actually a culture critique of the Euro-American dominated dance history, technique, and aesthetics. Sociologist and dance scholar Randy Martin states that dance makes global dynamics legible because dance technique exposes the fragility of legitimation and the power relation through technology. Martin analyzes what happens in a dance technique class. When dancers accept the authority of the technique, it suppresses the local histories that the dancers bears. Therefore, to master the technique is to limit the ability of bodily demands under the power of an institution. The institution enables dancers to master dance technique. However, when dancers acquire dance technique, they lose other abilities. In other words, they learn what they can do before they know what they can do. Consequently, immense parts of the possible are excluded from their technique. Dance technique institutionalizes individual bodies and suppresses the experience of aging. For example, 92-year-old American dancer Anna Halprin dislikes the method of training, the dance that is based on some preconceived stylization. She thinks, even though a particular dance movement was real, when the founder of that movement revolted against the established techniques, the followers of this new movement turned out to be all alike. Halprin's comments also support the idea that each dance technique presupposes a certain type of body for a dancer, a body that is similar to those of the founders of that technique. Because modern dance technique expects the person dancing to be in proper condition and demands the person be able to control their body in order to follow the choreography, the dancer is required to have a level of consciousness. Both the aging and the child body in dance suggest the loss of control of the body and conscious thought, which dance technique demands. By going beyond the boundary of self-control and self-consciousness, which the ideal dancer as a human being is supposed to have, the aging body questions the system of dance as well as the politics of art in each dance context. All professional dancers on stage can be free from these social regulations. When they approach the end of their lives, they become aware of themselves without showing off to the audience. For example, when Buto dancer Kazuo Ono goes beyond the boundary of age and gender, he goes beyond the limitations of a dancer. He is free from being exposed without the dance technique as dancers. In general, it takes a lot of self-confidence to be a dancer because one is totally exposed all the time. However, aging neutralizes the dancer and he transcends beyond this state of mind. Kazuo Ono describes his dance in relation to his own life. Quote, "At the age of nearly 80, there is not more stage and daily life." End quote. when dance covers one's whole life, one's life takes the form of dance. When the dancer gets to this point, the art of dance sets them free. So I show one clip, a short clip of Kazuo Ono, and he's dancing in his own dance studio. I visited Kazuo Ono's dance studio in Kamihoshikawa in Yokohama on December 27, 2008. I saw 102-year-old Kazuo Ono lying on bed, attached to many tubes in his living room. He was no longer capable of seeing and speaking because of his age. Kazuo Ono's son, Yoshito Ono, told me that Kazuo Ono danced even at his age. He breathed differently when listening to the music. On the way back to Kamihoshikawa Station, I was choked and suddenly burst into tears. He dances even on his deathbed. In 2010, Kazuo Ono passed away at the age of 103. Thank you so much for coming to the talk.
I think my name is Detlef Dorsch. I'm a dancer choreographer in Berlin Opera, and I think it is time that we change what dance is. It is a spiritual dance. It is a dance of many, many bodies, which we have, not only one physical body. And I think we thank you very much that Japan and Asia has to come to Germany or Europe to show us that it is time to make that the zeitgenössischer Tanz is more eternity dance. And insofar, I would say, we say all the people who dance for their life has to stand up, and we have the dance when we are 80, 90, 100, and 120 in order to live really with our higher bodies. Thank you.
Do you want to react to this comment, or?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for very moving comment. And I'm also happy to see the varieties of dance that I have never seen before, as long as I stay in my country.
John and Eric, dancer, choreographer. I would like to ask you if you see any tendency in the contemporary dance in Japan, like that they tend to also work with older people, or is it just kind of this decade and he's gone and what's coming?
I think there's also like structures of dance genres and styles in Japan, and each genre is, I would say, separated. So contemporary dance is only contemporary dancers, traditional arts, traditional dances are for traditional dancers, but there is also a kind of mixed inter-genre new project. And I would say there's one new project coming in Yokohama this year, and in that project, most of them are contemporary dancers, like Damtai performer is there, and one Buto dancers, who is almost 70s, is joined the project, and so they started working together. And I would say Buto dancers, maybe aging Buto dancers and contemporary dancers are working maybe more often than the traditional dancers and contemporary dancers together. And also, adding to that, there are many community dance plus art project. So like it's very difficult to categorize that project as a community dance or art dance. And that kind of attempt is made, has been made maybe for 5-6 years or so in Japan.
So I think we can have 2 more questions. I would ask you to be brief.
I'm really fascinated by looking at the spectrum of aging, so meaning the child body. But I'm also curious about the kind of critique that Sakurai has within that child body, as though those young women also, in some ways, cannot mature because of the threat of the aging female body in Japan. So I'm curious about that, whether you've looked at the problems around that end of aging. Yeah.
I think especially the contemporary dancers in Japan have also the similar fear of getting older, because they categorize in contemporary dance, which is not traditional arts. So that means also they share the sense of fear of getting older. And at the same time, almost all dance critics, like many of the dance critics are males, so it's also the gender critique is going on. So the female dancers are criticized by the male dancers who see them as very younger, or who wants to see them younger dancers. So that's also the power relationships between the critics, male critics, powerful male critics, and younger dancers in contemporary dance in Japan.
I'm Gun Lund from Gothenburg in Sweden, and I'm an old dancer, very old. I'm still a dancer, and I will continue to be a dancer. But I also have the opportunity to have a stage of my own, and I have for 15 years tried to get old dancers to perform on that stage, and there are lots of them. It's just the institutions, they throw the dancers away at 42, the female dancers, and the male dancers at 44. So they can be 2 years longer at the theater. But for us, there are dancers all over, and they had been dancers from the 20s, back to the 20s. They're still on stage. We have just to ask for them and put them on stage again. And last year I had Alfea living in south of France. She was 87, and she was dancing for some hours every day, and that was marvelous to see her on stage. So it's just for us to keep on. There is no saying that we should accept to be put away because we are going elder.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this passionate plaidoyer. And I think these were very good words to end the session today. It's very warm. Thank you for bearing with us here. Thank you very much, Nanako, for this fantastic talk. Thank you.
And thank you for coming, actually. Thank you.